Yes, so I wasn't.
So you were thinking specifically of a white,
South African way of-
racist-dominated society at the time, and you wanted to integrate into this way of life by specifically learning to speak Afrikaans, when arguably, I do remember, I'm old enough to remember MP Watterson was one of the English-speaking MPs.
So, in my view, the South African way of life in those days was nice weather, outside activities, boating, swimming,
Braaivleis,
pardon?
braaivleis,
All
rugby.
that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I was not interested in contributing to, for example, apartheid or anything of that nature. That wouldn't have been anything that I would have been interested in.
No. Mr. Sullivan, that is directly in contradiction to your own handwritten letter, which says that it would break your heart if you were not granted this status because you want to integrate into this society.
So I think, you know...
Then a white-dominated society. Apartheid, separate development, forced removals, separate education, group areas, homelands.
Yeah. In my 20s, at that stage of my life, I didn't even understand all of that. I had, what was that? In those days, I didn't understand all of that. I didn't even know the existence of a group areas. Of course, I know about it now. I had no knowledge. I had some knowledge, but I didn't have full knowledge of all the things that were going on. And had I have become a citizen at that stage, I would have helped contribute.
Are you saying you were naive?
Pardon?
Are you saying that you were naive?
No, I'm not saying I was naive, but had I have...
Well, then it's worse.
What do you mean it's worse?
If you can say, you know, I'm young and naive, I didn't really understand politics, I just wanted to do...
I'm not now naive. I thought you meant, are you naive? Then I probably was naive.
Yeah, well, but in 1982, you were already an electrical engineer. You were a learned person, certainly more learned than the average person, I would think, even in England.
Yes, possibly so. But, you know, when you're in your 20s, you have a different view on life as you would have later in life.
So what I want to drive to is that you were at this stage then recruited.
By who?
By the security agency of this country at the time.
Not a chance. Absolutely none whatsoever. Frank Martin wasn't involved. I mean, actually, you know, I knew Frank Martin very well. He was a train driver before the war. And then during the war, he became a prisoner of war, and he shared space with my late father. And after the war, he got back into driving trains.
But you
And then,
Mr. Sullivan, sorry, you're not trying to minimize and trivialize what is really a serious situation, that a letter is even addressed, which seems to be based on information given, false information, to the Director General of the Interior Ministry of this country at the time. Now you're trivializing, you know, Frank Martin was just a train driver, met you in the ex-servicemen's club, presumably just to drink beer, and you were a young 20-odd-year-old naive.
I'm not
but this is the completely different impression we got from your affidavit, in the early part of your affidavit, and the narrative that you've given us. Certainly when consulting and when reading it, oh, well, this is a fairly well-heeled, well-educated person coming from the UK. You know, we can't complain when people want to invest their money in our country, buying property, hopefully, you know, creating jobs for our people. But that's not the impression that one now gets when you read this letter and the application for permanent residence or even to become an immigrant.
I don't even remember at the time filling in any forms. So I wrote a 2-page handwritten letter. The typewritten letter I'd never seen before in my life. Yeah, it is what it is.
And you know what also then strikes one if with looking at your background from this viewpoint and different viewpoint is within the space of a year you decide to become a police reservist.
I was asked to become a police reservist.
Who is this Major Edwards?
He was the husband of my then secretary. I mean, if I could track him down, I don't even know him now.
Did you not look at his background? Well, it could be because this is one reads about or sees in a movie. He could have been involved in the security services. He could have been a boss. You remember that word, boss? Bureau of State Security?
Uh-huh.
Yes. So he could have been such an operative.
So his wife was my secretary. He was the station commander at Halfway House Police Station. And this suggestion that I should become a police reservist took place after the democratization process had started in South Africa. And that democratization process is what triggered me to take a decision to apply for permanent residence, because I felt that I didn't want to live in a country where apartheid existed. I took up the opportunity or the request to become a police reservist after Nelson Mandela had been released from prison and the ANC had been unbanned. And I saw opportunities. I thought there will be good opportunities to help make a democratic country. And I played my part. In fact, you can get on the phone now and speak to the erstwhile president, Kgalema Motlanthe, and ask him who came to see him in Shell House, which was then the headquarters of the ANC. Ask him who came to see him in Shell House to notify him of the existence of a game farm in the Northwest Province where some very strange things were going on. You can phone him and ask him.
Well, I'm not going to do that. I do have a lot of respect for Honorable Mr. Motlanthe. I'm not going to ask you that because I don't want to be distracted from what I'm asking you.
Okay.
Because this could easily fit into the narrative of someone who has infiltrated either the security forces or other intelligence forces in our country, that you would have had such meetings. You would have gone to Shell House. You would have met these important persons whose names you are dropping. But what I want to ask you about, because this is not what you say in your affidavit. Can I take you to paragraph 14 of your affidavit? In 1990, my secretary's husband, a certain Major Edwards in the SAPS, having heard of my background, persuaded me to join the South African Police Reserve. I took the view that if a country is good enough to live in, it's good enough to serve. In 1990, I joined SAPS as a reserve at the Halfway House, now Midrand, where I completed training as a detective. As a reservist, I was required to donate approximately 8 hours per week of my time at no cost to the SAPS. Now, this is some 8 years later, after you wrote a letter to a member of parliament at the time, who in turn wrote to the Director General of Internal Affairs, pleading for this young person, this young man, to be given immigrant status. Because it'll break his heart if he must go back to England. He wants to stay here and learn Afrikaans. He wants to integrate with a Christian white community.
I never said I wanted to integrate with the Christian white community.
That's what your letter says, Mr.
No, my letter
I'm paraphrasing, but that's what it
my
says.
letter doesn't say that. I'm
Well,
sorry.
and then I'll be disciplined if I'm misrepresenting what you're saying.
It's a misunderstanding of what I'm saying. I never stated that I wanted to integrate into a Christian white community.
Well, it's clearly to be inferred from what you're saying, from the language that you use. And I don't want to waste further time
Chairman,
by reading back.
At the time I emigrated to the country, I'd completely forgotten about this letter of 8 years or 9 years earlier. It was gone from my mind. In fact, I can't remember the year, but it was either 87 or 88 when my dear Frank Martin, God rest his soul, passed away. And it was the furthest thing from my mind.
You see what will also strike one, and obviously the honorable committee members and members of the public will make up their own minds. But certainly what struck me is that your role as a police reservist and what you did is one of two things. It is highly commendable for the time and effort that you've given to assisting our regular police in doing their law enforcement job. It's either that, or on the other hand, this is most extraordinary for a police reservist to be trained as a detective, to achieve an award for the most arrests, to be trained to do a train the trainer course and train 1,000, what did you say, 1,500 other reservists to graduate and to get their certificate, including our honorable president. So you have quite some notable students under your belt. You worked, and I'm looking at paragraph 16. You worked in the fraud unit at the then John Foster Square. As you know, was notorious. You lectured. You were elected chairman of the Community Policing Forum, paragraph 17. You formed Johannesburg Watch. So at all times, you were involved in policing. You were close to the action. And of course, by doing so, you're also close to other law enforcement people, intelligence officers involved in law enforcement in our country.
As a police service.
Yes. Because of the I'm saying those are the extraordinary things you did as a police reservist.
Yeah, Chairman.
I know a very, very good colleague of mine. He's actually one of our best advocates. He's a police reservist. You know, at night, in his own time, he goes with the police and they do neighborhood watch, they do patrols and all that. That takes And his life is often in danger. He's been shot a few times or shot at a few times. That's the extent of what he does. And he's a highly intelligent person.
I was doing the same. I was going out on the streets with police officials, doing crime prevention work, attending to crime scenes, carrying out investigations because I was a detective, and making the necessary arrests. I worked with full-time detectives. At all times, I had no dealings whatsoever with the intelligence services. The crime intelligence, in my knowledge, was something that happened somewhere else. I had no involvement in it whatsoever. Later that changed. After the year 2000 or after the 2002 or 2003, I started to understand what crime intelligence was and where it fitted into the big picture. But up until then, I had no idea about it.
Now, it's only because I am old enough to remember this. But do you know, do you recall that the same Mr. Powell that you referred to was in fact a security policeman?
I don't know who Powell is. That name I don't remember. I have no knowledge of who that person is.
It was referenced in the letter.
Yeah, but I have no knowledge of who that person is.
And do you know that he was involved in at the time in KwaZulu-Natal? I don't want to unfairly, unnecessarily, or in a defamatory way attribute it to Nkatha, but at the time he was connected with Nkatha in KZN. Were you not aware of that?
None whatsoever. In fact, until I saw this, because I never kept a copy of any letter back 42 years ago until I saw this last week. If you'd have said to me, who's Jim Powell, I have no idea. No idea whatsoever.
So before we move on or forward, Mr. O'Sullivan, is it your evidence today that you've at no stage ever been involved with the security police, either the one before 1994, before 1992, when things started to change in this country, or afterwards?
As God is my witness, I was never involved with the security police in South Africa. And I'm stating that again under oath, never once in my life was I involved. And if anybody wants to make inquiries at Boyson's police station, and by the way, I have a lot more press cuttings than what you've seen there. There's another document there. I can't remember the page, but it's included. And if you have a look at it, Chairman, either just before or just after that picture of handing Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa the award. I'm just looking for it now. I'll give you the page number. By the way,
well, we know, and I'm sure that the honourable members would have read your
Chairman,
affidavit.
Important evidence. If one looks at page 55
of your affidavit,
no,
of the
annexes, A55. Okay,
that's after the.
It's after the page
after
that
the
shows
picture with the.
Yes.
The honourable president.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That's an article that appeared in the Citizen newspaper in 1977. It says millions in forged post orders claim. And it refers to forged 100 Rand postal orders, which were circulating in Johannesburg. And we got approached at the fraud unit. We got approached. And by the way, that would have then no longer been John Vorster Square would have been Johannesburg Central Police Station. We got approached with a view to trying to find out where these forged postal orders were coming from. And I spent time, my time and energy, and we tracked down who was printing and issuing these forged postal orders. And this details the court case in respect of that. And if you go back to the page before the letter that we dealt with for, which was 53, if we go to page 52, that's an article dated July 27, 1995, Chairman. It's the Southern Courier, which is a newspaper that deals with the southern suburbs of Johannesburg. And the headline is "The Highs and Lows of Drugs." And if you have a look there, you can see the whole story is about people that are buying drugs on the street. And if you look at the bottom of the story, it says the technical aspects of this article were prepared for the Southern Courier by Detective Sergeant Paul O'Sullivan of the SAPS. Seen in the picture is Detective Sergeant O'Sullivan together with female constable Vermaak, making an arrest of 2 suspects with dagga and cocaine. That's far removed from being involved with intelligence services.
Well, before I ask Honourable Chair for my colleague Advocate Mkhize just to take over for a short while, I want to please be excused. I just want to say that it's also the perfect front to have these awards, meet all these important people, current president, former president, drop their names, and to continue some other undercover covert work. So on the face of it, yes, I've said to you it's impressive, and one can get a lot of credit for that kind of work. But it doesn't dispel or put pay to any theory that you have been or are involved also with other intelligence activities.
Is that a question? The reality of the situation is, I've stated a few minutes ago, and I'm stating again, while I was a police reservist, I was never involved in any way, shape, or form with any intelligence activity of any nature whatsoever. And since living in this country, I have not been involved in any way, shape, or form with any intelligence activity whatsoever. And that is it in a nutshell.
Honorable James.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just a bit concerned because it would appear that the witness has done quite a lot under the previous dispensation. We know that reservists are only allowed to operate in the visible policing environment. Mr. Paul O'Sullivan, you did fraud, you worked in the fraud unit, you made the most arrests, you were on active crime scenes. Do you have anyone that can vouch for this? Like a commander that you must have worked under because you were doing duties of a SAPS member?
Chairman, the regulations changed. In those days, a reservist could work with a unit, whichever unit he went to work with. And I was asked to work with the detective branch at Boyson's police station, which I did. And after an incident that took place in 1996, where I was shot, I was no longer able to carry out possible physical work relating to if you had to arrest somebody that became violent or something like that. So I then changed. I was said, you know, you're very good at what you're doing. You can go and work in the fraud unit. And that's what I did. And as for going back 30 years to find somebody that may be able to come and tell you, I can look, but it might not be that I can find somebody today or tomorrow that can come and say, by the way, he did this and that and what. But I can try.
So your title was detective sergeant.
I was a detective sergeant, Chairman, and that article that I just referred you to refers to me as a detective inspector, but that was what do you call it? A misunderstanding about a journalist. I was a detective sergeant. That's it, short and sweet.
Were you a reservist detective sergeant?
Correct. Now, the regulations in the police today for the reservists are different than where they were in the 90s. Now, the reservists, from what I understand, are in uniform. I worked, by the way, when I finished working as a detective sergeant at Johannesburg Central Police Station, I then relocated to the border police.
Chair, can I just wrap up?
OR Tambo Airport. And I was working in the border police for 2 years.
Honorable James, may you?
So just to wrap up, just so that I can be clear on this. So you are a forensic investigator, meaning that you dig deeper, you get information, and you are not able to tell this committee and give us evidence in terms of the time you worked as a SAPS detective. Am I correct? You are not able to give us anything that can justify everything that you have told this committee here today.
No, Chairman, that's not.
You're not. Did you have a force number?
Yes.
So you can't go back onto the system and track your force number and give us some form of evidence that this is what you've done, because even we can go and query that.
Chairman, I don't have access to the system. My force number.
No, we'll get it. That's fine.
Sorry, I'm
Thanks.
being asked a question and then I'm being given the answer. On page 53, A53, Chairman, there's a letter there dated 26th of June, 1997. And it says, Detective Sergeant Paul Robert O'Sullivan, force number 0245-296-1. There's my force number.
Thank you.
You know, anybody can go on the system through the necessary channels and find out. I was a police reservist until Jackie Celebi cancelled my work as a police reservist.
Yeah, we will come to the Jagis Levy matter. May his soul rest in peace. Honorable Matthys.
Also on a point of clarity, when Mr. O'Sullivan joined this police reservist, were you a South African citizen then?
Chairman, I wasn't a South African
Okay,
citizen.
that's fine.
I was a permanent resident. But in those days, the regulations required that you be either a citizen or a permanent resident.
You were a citizen at that time.
No.
No,
it
Chairman,
wasn't.
I was a permanent resident.
Mm.
The regulations were changed in 2000 or 2000.
Mr. Sullivan, you
that had
answered
to-
that already. And then just on the second point, Chair, so we need to do back office work here and get the regulations of what was happening with the police reservist unit during that. So we can just be workshopped on that, because I don't know which country would allow a non-South African to be this involved in our systems and having
Let's
access
not
to
debate the
information.
matter.
Thank
I
you.
think
No, we're not, just so we make sure we
the
follow.
point has been made. Abazel.
Thank you, Mr. O'Sullivan. We are at paragraph 18 of your statement. And we are still paragraph 18, page 7. And we are just about to wrap up your time as a reservist. At paragraph 18, this is now 10 years since you started as a reservist, and you were based at the airport, Johannesburg. At the time, it was Johannesburg International Airport.
That's correct, Chairman.
And you say in your statement that you were at that point part of a national team in the border police of Johannesburg. What was your specific role?
So the role of the border police, we worked together at the airport in 2 or 3 areas. One area was to prevent drug trafficking through the international port. Another area would be to make sure that people weren't coming through with forged documentation, for example, a fake passport. People that were involved in human trafficking. So actually, I was very successful in helping to stamp out human trafficking. We achieved quite a bit of work there. The other area we worked on was counterfeit goods. What's that noise?
You can continue.
Is it just in my ear? Or
Yes.
there would be importation of counterfeit goods. So we would go and do random checks together with the customs officers to identify counterfeit goods.
Could you name the specific successes that you were able to achieve in that period?
Yeah, we had quite a few successes. Chairman, may I refer to some documents to help expand on that? I would like to go to paragraph, not paragraph, page A62. By the way, at that stage, I was a police reservist and I was in the group executive for aviation security.
Yes, but I haven't reached the point at which you're an executive at AXA. I'm still just finalizing the point at which you were a reservist, specifically at the airport.
Yes, so we would have made quite a few arrests on the human trafficking side. In particular, labor human trafficking. We would have made quite a few arrests on drug trafficking. We made quite a few arrests on people with forged travel documents. And I'm talking about passports. You would have what we call returned traffic individuals. So some people that we trafficked, they knew they were being trafficked and they wanted to be trafficked and they were trafficked for labor. And certain countries I don't want to name the countries in case I'm accused of defaming them, but certain countries in the Eastern Asia area, they would traffic individuals here who would come voluntarily so that they could then go and work in sweatshops or in spaza shops out in the bush.
Yeah.
And they would spend 3 years here. Their passports would be taken by their employers. And when they left, you could see that they'd overstayed their visa or their visitor's permit. And they couldn't leave the country now because their passport, they would hide it in their luggage. And they would go to the embassy and say that they came on such and such a date and their passport was stolen. And they would be issued with what's known as a temporary travel document.
Thank you, Mr.
Which is
O'Sullivan.
valid for a one-way trip.
Thank you. You mentioned that at the time, as a reservist, it was volunteer work, and you were not receiving any pay for the work that you were doing. What work were you doing at the time that was not volunteer work, your full-time job? What was your job at the time?
When I started working at the airport,
At the airport, yes.
in the border police,
Yes.
I was involved in property development.
You're in property development, okay. You also mentioned at paragraph 18 that you worked in excess of 40 hours a week, which is the equivalent of what one would work in full-time employment. How did you manage to work 40 hours a week on volunteer work and still run your own property development entity?
Yes, so it's quite easy to explain, Chairman. In those days, I was a lot younger than I am now. I was also hyperactive. So I would start work early in the morning, finish in the afternoon, and then go and put 5 hours in at the airport. And then on Saturday and Sunday, I used to work because I enjoyed the work. So, and I say average, I didn't work 40 hours every week, but sometimes I was able to work in excess of 40 hours. When I was having the opportunity to do so, I would do it.
Mr. O'Sullivan, you,
Honorable Malema.
No, Mr. O'Sullivan, it is actually incorrect and unbelievable that you will say you want to come to South Africa and be integrated into the way of living without knowing what was happening in South Africa in the 80s, because the 80s were the most volatile years of our time. There were killings, there were state of emergencies declared. If I'm not wrong, in 86, I think it was declared twice. The youth were on the streets, people being killed. Even at your 20s, there's no way you can escape that point and come here and say, no, I didn't know what was happening. Maybe I was naive. That is incorrect. And then the only thing you're telling us is weather. You call the bodies of our people on the floor weather. Because that was what was happening at the time. People were being killed. And you wanted to come and join that kind of lifestyle of killing people. Are you not aware that people were being killed at that time when you were applying to become a citizen in South Africa?
I only applied to become a citizen in South Africa in 1994. And I became a citizen in 1995. So it's a reality that I had not applied to become a citizen. And it's also a reality that I have not stated that I did not know what was going on in the country at the time. I knew what was going on, but I didn't know the level of detail that I later found out. Because as you spend more time in a country, you find out more. So, you know, that's my evidence.
But in the letter you wrote, Mr. O'Sullivan, you spoke about the 80s and that you were just 20 and you had no idea, and we can still say maybe you were naive at that time. It can't be correct that you're talking about 95. There was an